What happens when a quiet girl calls the rain? The rain had long since stopped, leaving the schoolyard muddy and damp. In the corner by the stone wall, Joseph, a small boy with large glasses, tried to retrieve his school books from the ground. The local bullies, led by Musa, circled him like vultures. Where do you think you are going, glasses? Musa sneered, snatching Joseph's books and tossing them into the puddles. Laughter echoed in the yard, but Flora, watching from afar, gripped her hands tightly. The pain on Joseph's face mirrored feelings Flora knew all too well, although she stayed silent. Suliat was next. She was quiet, always scribbling poems in her notebook. Her gentle nature made her an easy target. The bullies didn't even need to use force. They had simply take her notebook, mock her poetry, and crumble the pages. Suliat tried to hold back tears as her work was shredded in front of her. Why don't you say something? One of the girls stuttered, but Suliat stayed silent, knowing that speaking would only make things worse. Flora observed from a distance, her heart aching but still unsure of how to act. Solomon had been an athlete, strong and fast until he was targeted. His achievements in sports had made him the center of attention, but Musa saw him as a rival. After one too many taunts about his family wealth, Solomon lashed out, shoving one of the bullies to the ground. That only made things worse. The next day, his uniform was ripped, his shoes stolen. No teacher intervened, and Solomon's confidence crumbled. Flora watched, anger boiling within her. She could feel the weight of injustice, but something held her back. One afternoon, the bullies finally turned to Flora. She had always been overlooked, the quiet girl who kept to herself. She was the kind of girl who blended into the background. In the bustling hallways of Freetown High School, her presence was often overlooked. Her classmates teased her for her old clothes. During class, they would pass notes filled with derogatory names. Laughter echoing through the room as teachers obliviously tried to cheat their lessons. Flora's heart sank with each insult, each jab at her self-worth. Musa and his gang cornered her by the school well. You are too quiet, Flora. What? You think you're better than us? He sneered. Flora didn't answer, staring at the ground. They made fun of Flora's quiet demeanor and the way she stuttered when they cornered her. But the taunts grew harsher, and soon one of the girls yanked Flora's bag, tossing it into the water. Fetch it if you want it back. Flora's heart raced and felt something shift deep inside her. Unknown to them, it was a storm that was brewing up. The skies darkened that evening as Flora lay in bed, tears streaming down her eyes. Her thoughts kept going back to her ruined bag, to the laughter of the bullies, and she drifted into a restless sleep. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance. That night, for the first time, Flora dreamt of the rain spirits. Ethereal beings danced in the clouds, whispering in a language she didn't understand but somehow knew. The rain began to fall, softly at first, then harder, and in her dream, Flora reached out to the spirits, commanding the storm to grow. The next morning, the entire village woke up to an unexpected downpour. The rain had been relentless throughout the night, flooding streets and homes. Musa and his gang soaked to the bone, caused the storm as they made their way to school. Flora arrived late, half her hair still damp, but she felt strangely calm. There was something familiar about the storm, a connection she couldn't explain. Her tormentors didn't approach her that day, too busy complaining about their soaked uniforms. Flora smiled to herself, but deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The nightly deluge didn't stop. Each time the bullies taunted Flora, the rain would return, more ferocious than before. Musa slipped in the mud, spraining his ankle, while the others found themselves losing sleep to the relentless pounding of rain on their roofs. Flora watched them suffer in silence, her anger ebbing as her sense of justice grew. But the village elders began to worry. These rains were unnatural, they said. The balance in nature was shifting, and soon the entire village would suffer if something wasn't done. Mabinty, an elder woman with wisdom beyond her years, noticed the signs. The storms were not random, nor were they a mere act of nature. She could feel the disturbance in the air, the imbalance between the earthly and spiritual realms. One evening, she approached Flora as she sat by the river, sitting at the dark clouds gathering in the sky. Child, do you understand the power you wield? Mabinty asked. Flora froze, her heart pounding. I don't know what you mean, she stammered, but Mabinty's eyes were sharp. You must be careful. Nature's wrath can be only controlled for so long. Flora tried to ignore Mabinty's warning, but the rains continued. Each night they grew worse. The village crops were drowning. The streets flooded and homes began to crumble under the weight of the endless storms. The bullies, once proud and fearless, now walked with their heads down, terrified of what would happen next. But Flora's heart was conflicted. She didn't mean for things to go this far. She had only wanted to protect herself. Now the whole village was paying the price for her desire for revenge. As the rains continued, Flora's guilt grew. She saw the damage being done to the village, the flooded homes, the ruined crops, and the despair in the eyes of the people. Every time the rain fell, Flora felt a tug at her heart, a reminder that she was the cause. She thought back to Mambati's words and wondered if there was a way to stop the storms. But how could she? The rain spirits had been so eager to listen to her before, but now they seemed out of control. Musa and his gang finally began to suspect something. Every time they tormented Flora, the rains grew worse. It couldn't be a coincidence. One evening, as they sat in the leaky shed, watching the storm rage outside, Musa spoke up. It's Flora. It has to be, he muttered, his voice shaky. The others agreed, but what could they do? Confronting Flora might only make things worse. Fear crept into their hearts as they realized they were no longer in control. Determined to make amends, Flora sought out Mbati. She explained everything, the bullies, the rain, and the strange connection she felt to the storms. Mabinty listened quietly, nodding as Flora spoke. The rain spirits are powerful, but they are not vengeful by nature, Mabinty said. They follow your will, but they also follow the balance of the world. You've disrupted that balance, Flora. Now you must restore it. Mabinty's words filled Flora with a sense of purpose, but also fear. Could she undo the damage she had caused? Despite the torment the rain had brought upon him and his gang, Musa remained as defiant as ever. The moment the rains eased, he returned to his bullying ways, picking on new targets and spreading fear throughout the school. His pride wouldn't allow him to admit he was scared, and his reputation demanded he maintain control. One day, he spotted a timid boy, Kadiatu, walking alone. Seizing the opportunity, Musa grabbed him by the collar and began hurling insults. Flora watched from the sidelines, her anger bubbling once again. How could Musa not have learned? Perhaps the rains hadn't been enough. Each time Musa bullied someone, Flora felt her powers grow stronger, like an untapped well of rage ready to overflow. She no longer saw herself as the victim but as a force that could right the wrongs of the world, starting with Musa. She no longer hesitated to summon the rain spirit, and the storms grew more violent. It wasn't just Musa and his gang who suffered now. The entire school began to feel the weight of Flora's wrath. Her power was intoxicating, and the rain spirit eagerly obeyed her commands, feeding off her anger and desire for vengeance. Amina, who had been Flora's closest friend for years, she had been the only one who stood by Flora when the bullying began, always offering kind words and a shoulder to lean on. But recently, Amina had grown distant. She had started spending more time with the popular girls, whispering behind Flora's back. One day, while Flora was practicing controlling the rain spirits in secret, Amina stumbled upon her. Shocked by what she saw, Amina's face twisted with fear. Flora, what are you doing? She gasped. Flora, startled and vulnerable, hesitated before explaining everything, hoping Amina would understand. Amina, however, saw an opportunity. She had always been envious of Flora's strength, even though she never admitted it. Now, with this newfound knowledge of Flora's powers, Amina realized she could use it to her advantage. The next day at school, rumors began to swell. Did you hear about Flora? They say she controls the weather, one girl whispered. Flora felt the stares and heard the whispers, her heart sinking as she realized Amina had betrayed her. Betrayed by the one person she had trusted, Flora's anger surged, and with it, the rains came, fiercer than ever before. Flora could no longer contain her fury. The skies darkened as she stood in the center of the schoolyard, rain lashing against the ground like a punishment from the heavens. Students ran for cover, but Flora didn't move. Her power, once a secret, were now known by everyone, and the fear in her eyes fueled her. Even Amina, standing at the edge of the crowd, trembled. You shouldn't have betrayed me, Amina. Flora's voice echoed through the storm. With a wave of her hand, lightning crackled the sky, and the rains turned into a downpour so fierce that it flooded the school grounds. The school became a place of terror. Flora's once quiet presence was now something to be feared. No one dared approach her, and the students walked in silence, hoping not to provoke her anger. Musa, usually the one instilling fear, had become a shell of his own former self, his confidence washed away by relentless storms. Amina, too, kept her distance, her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Flora's power grew with each passing day, but so did the imbalance in nature. The rain spirits no longer waited for her commands, they acted on their own, sensing her dark emotions. Flora began to feel the weight of her isolation. What had started as a means to defend herself had spiraled into something she could no longer control. The students avoided her. Even the teachers, who once turned a blind eye to bullying, now whispered about the witch who had brought the rains. Flora's nights were filled with dreams of the rain spirits, their voices growing louder, more demanding. She tried to silence them, but their whispers echoed in her mind, more and more power, more control. Despite the overwhelming fear, Musa could not let Flora's reign of terror go unanswered. His pride, though battered, still burned within him. He gathered what was left of his gang and decided to confront her. You think you can scare us with some rain? We are not afraid of you, Flora. Musa shouted across the schoolyard, his voice trembling despite his words. Flora turned slowly, her eyes filled with an eerie calm. The sky darkened again, and the wind picked up, swirling around like a vortex. You should be, she whispered and with that, the storm unleashed its fury. The storm that followed Musa's challenge was unlike anything the village had ever seen. Thunder roared and lightning split the sky as torrents of the rain flooded the streets. Flora's rage was out of control, and in the rain spirits reveled in the chaos. Musa and his gang were swept away by the floods, scrambling for shelter as the deluge threatened to swallow them whole. The village elders, watching from a distance, knew that something had to be done. The rains were no longer just a punishment, they were a curse upon the entire land, and Flora was at the center of it. Amina guilt-ridden and terrified, sought out Mabinty. She confessed her betrayal and begged the elder for help. Mabinty listened carefully, her face grave. Flora's powers have grown beyond our control. The rain spirits are not to be trifled with, Mabinty warned. You have unleashed something far more dangerous than you realize. Amina wept, realizing the depth of her mistake. She had betrayed her friend, and now the entire village was paying the price. What can we do? She asked desperately. Mabiti's eyes darkened. Flora must face the consequences of her actions, or the balance will never be restored. As the storms continued, Flora began to feel the weight of her actions. The rain spirits once under her control now acted on their own, feeding off her anger and fear. The village was suffering, and even the bullies, who once tormented her, were now at her mercy. Flora's dreams were no longer filled with the gentle whispers of the rain spirits. They had turned into nightmares, with visions of destruction and chaos. She couldn't escape the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The power she had once craved was now consuming her. The village elders convened, their faces grim. They had watched as the storms ravaged their homes, and they knew that the source of the imbalance lay with Flora. She had become a danger to herself and to the village, one elder said. Mabati, though reluctant, agreed. The rain spirits are not to be controlled by a child. Flora's misuse of the power has brought us to the brink of disaster. The elders decided that action must be taken. Flora will need to be confronted, but not with force, with understanding. They needed to restore the balance before it was too late. Mabinty approached Flora once more, this time with a sense of urgency. You've allowed your anger to control you, and now the spirits control you as well. Mabinty said sternly. Flora, exhausted and afraid, nodded. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. Mabati placed a hand on her shoulder. Power is not something to be taken lightly. You must learn to let go, or you will lose everything. Your friends, your village, and yourself. Flora looked into Mabati's wise eyes and felt the truth of her words. But could she truly give up the power that had become so much a part of her? The school halls, once filled with the typical chatter and laughter of students, had fallen eerily silent. Rainwater dripped from the ceilings, flooding the classrooms and creating pools on the cracked tile floors. Laura walked through the halls like a ghost, Her presence a reminder of the storms outside. She could feel the weight of every stare, the hushed conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. The students feared her, not just because of the rain, but because they knew she had changed. Her power had turned her into something they no longer recognized. Musa, despite everything he had endured, was still plotting. He hated Flora now more than ever, not just for the storms, but for the way she had humiliated him in front of the entire school. His pride couldn't take it. We have to stop her, Musa whispered to his remaining gang members. Though most of his friends had deserted him, a few remained, unwilling to show weakness. But how? One of them asked, looking nervously at the window as rain battered the glass. Musa's eyes narrowed. Who exposed her to the teachers, the headmaster, will make her pay. Flora felt her grip on the school slipping further and further. Students avoided her in the hallways, teachers whispered behind closed doors, and even the headmaster cast suspicious glances in her direction. She overheard fragments of conversations which, dangerous, shouldn't even be here. These words cut deep, but Flora no longer had the energy to fight back. She had thought her powers would bring justice, but all they had brought was fear and loneliness. Even her closest friend had abandoned her. And the rain, it wouldn't stop. She could feel it pressing in on her, demanding more, consuming her thoughts. Amina sat at the back of the classroom, watching Flora with a mix of guilt and fear. She regretted betraying her, but the damage was done. Flora knew it was Amina who had spread the rumors, and the rain seemed to follow Amina now like a shadow, as if Flora's fury had signaled her out. Every time the storm worsened, Amina felt the weight of her own betrayal. She wanted to apologize, but how could she face Flora now? Flora's power had made her untouchable, but Amina knew that power had also made her more fragile than ever. One morning, Flora was summoned to the headmaster's office. The air in the school had grown heavy with tension, and Flora knew why. The headmaster, a stern man who rarely showed emotion, sat behind his desk with a deep frown. Flora, he began, his voice steady but laced with concern. There have been reports, rumors about you. Students are saying that you have something to do with the storms. Is this true? Flora didn't respond. She stared at the rain streaking down the window, her heart racing. This can't continue, the headmaster pressed. If there's something you need to tell me, now is the time. Flora stood in silence, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. What could she say? That she controlled the rain spirits? That the storms were a manifestation of her anger and fear? How could she explain that she never wanted any of this, but now she was trapped by her own power? The headmaster's voice broke through her thoughts. Flora, if you can't give me an explanation, I'll have no choice but to take actions. The students are afraid, and we can't have this kind of disruption in the school. Flora looked at him, her throat dry. She wanted to speak, but the words couldn't come. That afternoon, something shifted. The rain had been relentless for days, but now it turned violent. The skies above the school turned black, and the winds howled, ripping the banners from the schoolyard and shattering windows. Students huddled in the classrooms, some crying, others praying. The teachers tried to calm them, but even they were on edge. Musa, sensing an opportunity, whispered to his gang, now is our chance. We expose her and she's finished. They nodded in agreement, but even Musa couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. as the storm raged outside. Musa and his gang approached the headmaster later that day, drenched from the storm. "It's Flora!" Musa blurted out. "She's the one causing all of this. The rain, the storms, they started because of her. We've all seen it." The headmaster raised an eyebrow, looking skeptical. "You expect me to believe that one girl can control the weather?" Musa leaned forward, his voice frantic. "I swear, sir, she has powers. She's been using them to punish us, to punish everyone. That's why the rain won't stop." The headmaster's frown deepened, but Musa's desperation was starting to break through his thoughts. Word spread quickly through the school that Musa had reported Flora to the headmaster. When Flora heard, something inside her snapped. She had been trying to hold back to suppress the overwhelming power that surged within her. But now, there was no more turning back. The betrayal was too much. She stormed out of the classroom, the rain outside responding to her every emotion. The skies darkened further, and the wind screamed through the corridors of the school. Flora stood in the middle of the schoolyard, her arms outstretched, and the rain poured down in torrents. "You wanted to see power," she screamed. "Here it is." The storm Flora summoned was unlike anything the school had ever experienced. The rain came down in sheets, flooding the classrooms and sending students and teachers scrambling for cover. Lightning cracked the sky, and the wind uprooted trees from the courtyard. The power Flora wielded had spiraled out of control, and the rain spirit, sensing her desperation, fueled the storm to even greater heights. Musa and his gang, who had watched Flora's outburst from a distance, were paralyzed with fear. "We need to stop her," one of Musa's friends yelled, but even Musa knew there was no stopping Flora now. As the storm raged on, Flora felt the rain spirits pulling at her, the voices louder than ever. They no longer obeyed her commands. Instead, they acted on their own accord, feeding off her emotions, her rage, her fear. Flora's heart pounded as she realized she was no longer in control. The rain spirits had taken over, and the storm would only end when they willed it. The students, the teachers, and even Musa and his gang were nothing more than spectators to the chaos Flora had unleashed. Amina, terrified by the disruption, finally gathered the courage to confront Flora. She found her in the middle of the storm, drenched and wild-eyed, as the winds whipped around them. "Flora!" Amina screamed, struggling to be heard over the howling wind. "You have to stop this!" Flora turned, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "It's too late, Amina. I can't control it anymore.